Hello, I am Ellen Donoghue, and welcome to Your Ardent Nature, in which we explore mindfulness practices and teachings to help us anchor in our sense of aliveness. Today's sessions will explore the wonderful ways that we can connect with wildlife and natural places in order to fill a core human need to connect. Before I go into today's practice and a couple little teachings associated with it, I want to back up and describe a bit more what I mean by anchoring in our aliveness. I recognize that for each person, a sense of aliveness will feel different. We'll have different attributes, qualities, characteristics, intentions. That is wonderful and fine. But what I'm exploring here is the ways that we can cultivate inner strengths to anchor in our wholesome, heartfelt aspirations, whatever they may be. And inner strengths may fall along a whole spectrum or network of confidence, courage, determination, grit, patience, or gratitude, compassion for ourselves, compassion for others, goodwill, loving kindness, or perhaps ease, peace, joy, equanimity, resilience. It's a whole spectrum of inner strengths, and we can grow them in the flow of everyday life with simple, basic mindfulness practices that take just 10 to 20 seconds. And the more we do them, the more what happens is we then do reframe this brain. We tilt it in the orientation of our choosing and away from its legacy of 500 million years of evolution, which does allow it to anchor in the negative, right? So the other thing we try to do with these practices and teachings is release the grips of anxiety, doubt, and judgment. Some of you know that I'm really fascinated by fear and the way that fear affects the human mind, how it affects how we engage, respond, and react to the world around us. And I think that part of that is because due to nature or nurture, I've grown up with a disposition, a temperament that tends to be fear-free. Not always, of course, but I think on the whole, that tends to be how I am. And it doesn't mean I'm fearless, and it doesn't mean that I'm a risk taker, but it does mean that I'm not as easily gripped by fear than I think some other people are around me. So my radar seems to be up for that type of tendency in individuals, groups, and organizations. And my aspiration here with Ardent Nature is to help individuals, groups, organizations release the grips of fear. One thing that is so important that I really follow, a basic principle or a really important notion, actually comes from Albert Einstein. And what he said, many things that he said that was so amazing, was that we simply cannot solve the problems of today with the same level of consciousness that created it. Now, I have been working in social and environmental activism, research, change, positive change for many, many years, as I imagine many of you have been as well. And as I've explored and discovered how these things are manifesting in our culture and our societies today, I've come to some conclusions about that. That is that the level of consciousness that has created some of our most complex and entrenched social and environmental issues on this planet really do come from a place of doubt, judgment, greed, envy, compartmentalizing. Oh, they are this way, we are this way, thus, them type of thing, putting people in boxes. And that often comes with that overstimulated nervous system that we've talked about, which predisposes us to want to judge and separate and compare and contrast rather than accept and be open to different ways. But clearly those tendencies and greed, envy, doubt, and judgment are fear-based tendencies. They have origins in fear. So if we can work towards releasing the grips of fear, growing the inner strengths, offering and identifying first, and then offering our unique skills and abilities on behalf of, you name it, whatever group of beings or ecosystems that may resonate with your heart, I do believe we can make a massive difference on planet Earth, creating a new level of consciousness. Many of the groups and organizations that I work with and have worked with for many years and been a part of, we do tend to orient in that fear-based perspective. How often have these lovely people around me working on whether it's climate recovery or other really important social and environmental causes are saying things like, we just got to get them to change. How do we get people to do this? How is it that we make them do this? Keep in mind that that is pushing up against what we don't like. That is a fear-based perspective, rather than moving towards what it is we aspire to grow, improve, and cultivate here on planet Earth. So there are two different orientations. And I think what Einstein is trying to tell us, as well as many wisdom teachers around the world in their own very subtle and beautiful way, that a different level of consciousness, basically rewiring the human brain towards its natural tendency, which is calm, contentment, peace, gratitude, compassion, goodwill, is the way to go. Keep in mind that when we are in a fear-based orientation, we've talked about this before, we will, of course, probably in almost every session, we have a very narrow perspective. We'll save more in depth about fear to another presentation, but let's just explore what happens when we do release the grips of fear, doubt, judgment. Wow, our sense of possibility really explodes. That freedom, that liberation, like, oh, we could do that. We might try this. The other thing that happens is our creativity just ramps up in ways we can't do when we are in a fear-based approach. The other thing that happens when we release the grips of fear is that we're more open to other perspectives. We really value the diversity of insights and cultures and intuitions and knowledge, local and traditional knowledge. We value that in new ways. Therefore, we pursue partnerships and collaborations to address these incredibly complex social and environmental problems. So this is all about, as I like to say, saving the planet one human mind at a time. As many of you know, I am a natural resource social scientist, which means I've had the great privilege to study the connections between people and the natural world in a variety of places around the world. I'm currently located in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. I've also been a wilderness guide and a competitive ski juror and dog musher in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. And most recently, I've been diving into Buddhist psychology, receiving training in that, as well as certificates in brain science. I'm very fascinated by the evolution of the human brain, particularly, as I've mentioned, how it then creates our own sense of well-being and contentment. We're talking about in these sessions 4 basic tenets of mindfulness that I've gleaned from a variety of wisdom teachers over the years. I'm just going to list them here so it's captured in this video. I do want to move on to the teaching and the practice of today. And I also want to echo here the reminder that all of the images that I will be using here are from the wonderful explore.org wildlife web cameras. I'm their greatest champion, their ambassador. They probably don't even know exists. Telling everybody about them because I do believe that it's helping connect people to the natural world. And my study of the chatter comments is suggesting, not definitively, that it's helping rewire brains away from anxiety, doubt, and judgment because we're connecting to wildlife. So that's a lot of what today's about. So the 4, thank you, explore.org. You are amazing. And I love you. And the images you see there are because this 100% philanthropic organization exists to bring wildlife from around the world. I tend to focus in North America and South Africa, 2 places I'm most drawn to in recent years for whatever reason. So back to these basic 4 tenets. The first one we explored in the previous session about enhancing our awareness of how our mind is inclined. That is the first step in any kind of intention to become more mindful. It is first to recognize, how is my mind inclined? How is it resting? How is it oriented right now? Because only when we then know how it's resting and how it's oriented, can we then do what? Can we then pause for just a second and then actively shift it in a direction that may be more wholesome, healthy, productive? We'll make a choice to not react in a typical tendency we may do, a negative reactive tendency. We can opt for choosing another one. Many of these practices are about cultivating or quieting our mind to reduce the sensation of an overstimulated nervous system. We'll talk about this more. What happens when the nervous system is overstimulated? We very more easily tip into criticism of ourselves and of others, and judgment, and putting people in that box or that box. So the still mind does release us from that tendency in really beautiful ways. The third and the fourth we will explore in future sessions, but I do want to list them here. All right. So back to Einstein and this notion that we simply can't solve the problems of today using the same level of consciousness that created them. And my intention here with Ardent Nature and with these sessions on the YouTube channel, Your Ardent Nature, is to really cultivate the sense that individual personal growth can be a very powerful conduit. I contend the most powerful conduit for wildlife conservation, ecosystem restoration, climate recovery, social and environmental justice, and the way that humans will respect all beings on this planet. It becomes an individual process. So my little motto, saving the planet one mind at a time. Yeah, it might take a while. I'll see what we can do in the time that I have left. But this is really important. Why is it? Because we can cultivate inner strengths. We can release the grips of doubt, judgment, and fear. And when we do that, when we pursue our wholesome, heartfelt aspirations from a more empowered state, feeling fully resourced, or at least making steps to feeling more resourced, then our interactions with any being, pet, bird, wildlife, child, neighbor, coworker, family member, all of that gets improved because we are now more mindful of our reactive tendencies, the habits, the ways we react that may not be serving us or our loved ones, communities, ecosystems very well. We are more mindful of the choices we make in our purchases, in what we do, also in our inactions as well as our actions. And I contend that individual personal growth is the most powerful conduit for improving life on planet Earth. And as you know, I do connect with nature in all of these sessions as our teaching tool and opportunity. And having traversed tens of thousands of miles, tens of thousands of hours in very wild places on this planet, I can say with quite certainty that nature has been the most influential constant and a profound teacher in my life. And I've had many wonderful human teachers. Okay, onward with today's session. Let me first say I do offer these types of inner peace outer training for those groups and organizations at the front lines of social and environmental advocacy, those champions who are working for marginalized communities, endangered species, anybody who's really been hit hard by injustice. And these trainings are really geared towards them. Now, on to today's session, connecting with wildlife. Well, psychological researchers have characterized core human needs in a variety of ways. I'm going to use the typology that one of my mentors, Dr. Rick Hansen, uses here as I describe the 3 core human needs. This session will just focus on one of them, but I do want to list all 3 just to give us a nice introduction. The first one is our sense of safety. We need to feel safe, right? And when there's a deficit or disturbance in that area, wow, we really can become unraveled. It's a core need. Safety in our environment, that our roof is not going to fall down on top of us. We have a place where we can sleep and get a good night's sleep. Safety in terms of being able to provide for ourselves, as well as the people or animals, individuals, ecosystems that are dependent on us. Safety is really a core need. Another one is our sense of satisfaction. You might think of this also as a sense of fulfillment, perhaps even a sense of accomplishment. That is also a core human need. Today, we are talking about the need to connect as one of the most social species on the planet. The human need to connect is very, very important. I am highlighting here a couple of different species from Southern Africa or the African continent here. Here we have a breeding herd of elephant that, again, another example of a profoundly social species on this planet. So today we will talk about connection, a core human need to connect. What psychological research is also telling us is that to fulfill a void or a deficit in this core human need, it actually does not have to come from other humans. Yes, there's a huge benefit if we can feel we are connecting to other humans, and we can talk about all the different ways we might do that. But it can also happen when we connect to natural places, and I would contend wildlife. And indeed, I would even say individuals within a specific wildlife species. This can be a very profound connection. So another profoundly social species, baboon, also seen here. These cameras are in Southern Africa. Very, very social, need to connect. It's all part of their well-being to allow them to survive. What we're going to do here is talk about two things: the many ways we can connect to nature as a way to fill that deficit or disturbance. Now, when I use those terms, a deficit in a core human need, what do I really mean there? I'm talking about whether it's a momentary sense of I'm not feeling connected. There's a sense of isolation, of disconnect, and I appreciate that right now. For many people, this past year has been a new whole sensation of disconnect, isolation. For many people, I recognize that. And that's why I'm here to say we can fill those voids. We can fill those deficits, whether they're just in the moment that you're feeling it. Maybe it's something you've been feeling for a couple of weeks. Maybe it's been going on for months or maybe even years. We can do these simple practices to fill those needs in really wonderful ways, and then allow us to feel more empowered and anchor in our aliveness. And when we are in that mode, then we can recognize, acknowledge, and cultivate our unique gifts and offer them in whatever way on behalf of planet Earth. So lots of different ways to connect with nature. First, we have the experiences, actually going out in nature, and that may differ for every single person. That differs, whether it's your backyard, going to the top of your apartment building, where there might be a nice view. Maybe there are local parks. Maybe you are adjacent to a protected area or a reserve or a greenway or a wildlife refuge of some sort. There's many ways we can connect to nature. I recognize that that's not as easy for some people as it is for others. Fortunately, there are web cameras. Again, thank you, explore.org, and all the other organizations and groups that are putting up web cameras. Even my little community here in the Columbia River Gorge, we're trying to get a web camera up to an Osprey platform that we installed last year that was very successful. We sure would like to get a web camera there. But there are live events, there's videos, there's photos. You can connect to nature through essays or art as well. Let's explore then at the end of the session a mindfulness practice that I've developed and shared with a variety of groups and individuals to help us fill this need to connect by experiencing nature. It's a practice, right? That means the first time we do it, it's going to feel strange. It's going to feel weird. It may take weeks. Remember, I was a CrossFit trainer and I loved helping people, coaching people, empowering them, oftentimes women, but not exclusively women, to do a pull-up. Many people think they can't do it or they haven't been able to do it since they were in high school. These are practices. It takes time to learn these things, but give it 6 weeks or 8 weeks. You could be doing a pull-up or you could be indeed filling a void of disconnect with the sensation of deep, profound connection. Onward with the ways that wildlife cameras really do help us connect. So I'm going to feature a few hopefully fun slides of wildlife web cameras, mostly Africa, but will also be in North America as well. So they help us connect with individuals. You can begin to recognize an individual. If you watch them enough, you can certainly do that. The other thing they do is they bring us very up close and personal. I don't know how many humans have had the opportunity to get physically this close to an elephant. Boy, if you have, you are a lucky soul for certain. But wow, how fun to really connect, to be able to see the feet, the toes, the toenails of an elephant, and to watch then how these cameras help us observe an elephant using the pumice stone effect to smooth out a rough foot, first the back right leg and then the left leg. And also how they can just get so up close. We can look at every nook and cranny by these wildlife web cameras. If we aren't connecting with this elephant right now, then that would surprise me for certain. The other thing that the web cameras do is they introduce us to species we may not have considered. That little sign behind, I think, which is probably where my photo is the Audubon Society motto, protect the birds and we protect the earth. I had that up there for a different presentation at one point, but it's such a wonderful motto because, as some of you know, I'm fascinated by migration of animals as well as birds, and the notion that if we protect all the different ecosystems that a migrating animal covers in its 2,000 or 5,000 mile journey of migration twice a year, perhaps different than that for some species, we really can do a great job of protecting many, many resources, because many migrating animals depend on water ecosystems, forested, plains, you name it. So anyway, as a fun way, wildlife cameras help us connect to species we don't know much about. I certainly knew very little about puffins a few years ago until I started watching a web camera in a burrow. This is indeed a puffin chick out of Seal Island, Maine. Steve Kress and his team of dedicated volunteers and researchers, after several decades, puffins are now returned to this island. And what we can see with these web cameras inside the boulder nest area, where this pair of parent puffins are, first you can see the chick is hatching here. We really get to know the individuals. We get to know them very well. And wildlife do have unique, dare I use the word, personalities. And when you get the chance to get to know them, get to know the way they may tilt their head, or types of sounds they make, the way they interact with their partner or maybe their offspring, it can be very joyful. So in this scene below, one of the parents, I don't know if that's Willie or Millie, I'm not sure, bringing in fish for the tiny little gray fluffball chick. And here the chick is quite a bit older. On the right-hand side, it is tucked under one of the parents' wings, keeping it nice and warm and cozy. Yes, that's endearing. And up there on the top, you can see the chick is almost the size of the adult. And in this last little image here, we are actually seeing this chick, which I think the researchers and that community called Conrad, he is just, you'll see him on that boulder right there. He is flying into land, jumping down the boulder, going into the Atlantic Sea in a way that we don't even know what's going to happen. So that goes back to the awe and wonder session we had. I uploaded a few days ago. Amazing. Even though they've been researching this species for a number of years, we aren't really sure what they do for about 4 years out at sea before they may come back to a place like Seal Island and consider breeding as well. More about wildlife cameras and how they really can connect us in unique ways. Watering holes, really, really fun to explore and get to know. You might see some of the usual suspects around watering hole, whether they be elephants or various antelope species, giraffe coming to take their drink. They do in their very interesting way, ballet dance, ballet pose stretch that they do to drink. But the other thing is it lets you get up close and very personal, as I said before. So in this particular watering hole, what I'm circling right there is a Blacksmith Lapwing little nest. So this, don't know if that's the male or female. I believe, someone can correct me, that both the male and female do incubate and care for the chicks. And what we can see here is carefully incubating 3 eggs right on the edge of the watering hole. Any old elephant or somebody could stop by. They're very protective and defensive of their eggs, their nest site, and their chicks. Here the rain is pouring down on mama, perhaps papa there. And of course there are visitors, a little terrapin coming to check out what this Blacksmith Lapwing is doing. Really allows us to get to know special areas. Well, one chick did survive, and the chatters at that particular site, as some of you know, I do study some of the chat comments, not in this particular case, but they did name her Joy, and they really loved following her around in her progress. My point is, getting back to this core teaching, people who are watching this were connecting to the parents, to the incubation, which went on for who knows, probably at least a couple of weeks, then the hatching of this chick, and now this chick is off looking for a meal here and there, and being still cared for by its loving parent. That's why these birds are so fun to watch. I really enjoy watching them because they do tuck their offspring up, I believe it's under their wing, so they look like they have little 4 legs. And I think some of these images will show little Joy popping out from underneath mom, maybe even dad. You all can correct me on that one. Like this. So again, we're connecting. We're gaining an appreciation. I also recognize that, as I said earlier, 2 of the chicks didn't make it. So when we connect with wildlife, it also helps us learn acceptance and about that really hard lesson of the impermanence of all things. And this is a different topic. Let's explore it down the road. I'm going to bookmark it here in my own brain. But many of us who are trained in wildlife sciences, environmental sciences, even the social scientists, we are in some ways trained to kind of turn our hearts off to some degree. And I think that's one of the reasons why I eventually did leave my research position. I didn't know that at the time that was why, but that is because we do need to be impartial and objective in our pursuit of research, in the questions and inquiries that we're pursuing. However, it doesn't mean it requires us to be dispassionate about what it is we are studying. And so when, for example, this past summer, the amazing group of researchers and their volunteer and team of partners out of Big Basin, California, were hit by one of the many, many fires that we have here in the Western United States, including a couple 100 feet from my home in the Columbia River Gorge, that did what fire does. In that particular area, the condor recovery site, the California condor, the most endangered species, efforts that they've been pursuing to restore condors back to the environment has been phenomenal. And that fire did lead to the loss of a number of adults and chicks of condors. I believe it's over a dozen. And I recall hearing a brief interview by one of the lead researchers, and you could almost sense that he was hesitant to say that he was experiencing profound grief. And so I am here to really try to reframe that tendency. We can be an objective scientist doing excellent research and still have what? An ardent nature, a passionate nature about what we do, which means we will feel, and that is okay. We all will learn more from the scientists and practitioners who are willing to open up their courageous hearts. Recently, I was able to hear from some of the naturalists on Safari Live who were offering tribute in a variety of ways to the passing of a beautiful leopard male, Hukamori, in that area in South Africa. And I was so grateful for their heart-centered approach, that courageous heart, where they did speak to the sorrow and the loss, as well as acknowledging the reality of human-wildlife conflicts, but they were not hesitant to say that they were touched by this individual. And the more we can acknowledge and appreciate and accept the ways we are touched by other beings, the more we will feel what? That we are truly anchored in our aliveness. Onward. So a few other wonderful ways that connecting with nature can be so profound, and getting to know the individuals or families, again, that these wildlife cameras really do provide. There's other ways to connect with individuals. You may have certain birds that come to your bird feeder that you've come to get to know, things like that. So this is a great gray owl. Owl Research Institute has partnered with explore.org to set up some cameras. Even though Denver Holt and his team at Owl Research Institute have been studying owls for decades, they didn't know that much about great gray owls. And what's so fun about this web camera is that they are actually using citizen science. All the loyal fans and followers of the nests like this was a few years ago, that love watching these birds, and they're gaining a lot of good scientific information about this fairly elusive bird, great gray owl. Okay, I'm not going to tell the whole story here. My point is that stories can be told. These are individuals having experiences as a unit, parents taking care of young. They're very profound, and that is connecting to wildlife. And I can just feel, in reviewing these images that were taken now a couple of years ago, I can feel that sense of connection being restored for me. I remember all of these individuals, and in fact, there's one that's kind of a little renty. You'll see him and kind of maybe pick him out there. The other three did fledge from this nest cavity on top of a large, tall snag. One was left, the little one. So there's a mama with the little one. And I'm really remembering how I felt when I was witnessing this. There is mama giving little one the look of, okay, when are you going to leave here? We've been here a long time. It's time for you to fledge, little one. She looks very serious there, but in fact, was an amazing, and is, I think she's still around, an amazing mom. take its time. And I just want to show them this image of that little one flying for the first time, because as you know, I am so fascinated by the first flight, the fledge of a bird. The parallel to the human heart and spirit doing what it's most wanting to do, what it's passionate about doing, what it feels its innate gifts and talents are calling for it to do, in this case, to fly. If you're a bird, I am very drawn to that, and I try to witness it whenever I can on these cameras. The little guy did get down to the ground, bounced in the soft grass, made its way up to one of the nearby conifers, and has been dutifully cared for by its parents, being fed vole and mice. Okay, the last thing I want to say about these wildlife web cameras, and wildlife in general, very fun aspect of wildlife, is that they can remind us of the benefits of play. There's a variety of different species, all of them in this example probably young. I don't know about the jackals if they are also young on that list, but they're certainly acting like young animals, having had 45, 50 sled dogs. I can appreciate what animals look like when they're kind of animals of this type, assuming, look like when they are playing. The other thing I want to point out is pandas. I've only recently discovered giant pandas, and they are so playful. The adults with their offspring, the adults with themselves, young baby panda, they'll just pick up something and start playing with it. And I do believe it's simply to explore fun. And then we have the young little baboon pouncing on mama, even though it is time to go to bed. These cameras, most of them have infrared, so we can see there's a certain troop that bed down in a tree along the Olifant River that I enjoy checking out. And of course, on the right, we have the cutie little impala lambs doing their little playful jumping thing. Another benefit. Okay, we're going to wrap this up now with a simple mindfulness practice, because I do like to offer practices. I call this one gratitude greetings while ambling along. You can make up your own name for it. Here's what you want to do. Here's what you want to collect up to do this practice. Find a place where you can walk at a very, strolling pace for about 5 minutes. So if it's in your backyard, you're going to be doing laps perhaps, or maybe you have a big backyard, but you want to be able to move slowly in a natural setting for about 5 minutes. If it's along a trail in a park, great. You might need to go back and forth. If it's in the woods, following an animal trail, you can use that. Find some place in nature where you can move at a relatively slow pace for, say, 5 minutes. The second thing you want to do is you want to identify something in that ecosystem or environment for which there will be multiple of. So in this example, you can see this is sort of a classic Pacific Northwest, at least the west side of that Cascades species, where we have cedar, Doug fir, very, very green, lots of fern. And so imagine that there's a trail going through this area here, and I'm going to select for my thing, for this mindfulness practice, I'm going to pick fronds of fern. So each fern may have 20, 30, 40 fronds, but I'm going to be identifying one. So for your trail, you'd let me to use that word. You may be walking along a beach, so it's not a trail. Find your one thing. It could be pine cones. It could be leaves. Right now we're in winter in the Pacific Northwest, so many of our deciduous trees do not have leaves. If you're walking along a beach, it could be shells. Or if you're walking near a river where there's lots of rolled rocks that are nice and soft and rounded, look for the ones that are red or black or a certain pigment. Find something that there are numerous of in your area where you're doing this practice. Okay, so you've got your area where you can walk for 5 minutes strolling along. You've got some item or something that's related to this area that you'll be able to identify. And then what you do is walk along and identify one, look at it. You can say it in your mind or say it out loud, depending on where you're at, and then offer it a greeting. So for instance, if I'm walking along a trail in this wooded ecosystem here, and I've identified fronds of a fern for my practice here, I will walk by, I will see a frond, and I will say, hello, you are amazing. And then keep on walking. So keep the same pace the entire time. And I'll get to the next frond I'm so grateful you are here, and offer a different greeting. It could be the same one over and over again. Pick a greeting that you would like. I am so grateful to see you. Hello, it's nice to meet you. Hello, fond of this fern. Look at you, all bright and green. You look fairly new. You look, just offer it just a 2 or 3 word little greeting, and then you're keeping moving along. You're doing this for 5 minutes, and I promise you, this will feel awkward the first time you did this. So did flossing your teeth, right? So practices, they're called practices for a reason. They're gonna feel weird at first. And trust me, the more we do them, the more it'll feel the benefits of them. Same with exercise, same with nutrition. It just takes time. Not gonna happen the first time. So again, as a different example, imagine this is a seashore scene, and I've identified shells of a certain type that I'm going to look for. I'm walking along, strolling at a strolling pace. I see one. I may offer it a greeting. Wow, I'm so grateful for all those colors in your shell. And I look at it, I keep moving on. I see another one, similar shape that I'm looking at. Hello, I'm so grateful you're here. So grateful for the life you had, and now you're this beautiful shell. Keep walking along. Hello, shell, nice to meet you. You pick the greeting, and again, it can change each time you see an individual. At the end of that 5 minutes, you have likely greeted with gratitude, loving kindness, goodwill, some wholesome intention, maybe 20 to 100 of these individuals, maybe more than 100, right? If you're really into this practice and you are doing it, it may be more. Something else has happened though. All the fern fronds in my example here that I didn't greet, I accept that they are now, I missed out on that. Our culture and our tendency is to want. We crave after the things that are pleasurable, and we really resist anything that's displeasurable, right? So what we're trying to do in this practice is also help our mind orient to the impermanence of things. So I can say hello and a greeting to that pine cone and that pine cone and that pine cone. Boy, I've certainly missed many pine cones along the way. And rather than feeling regret or anxiety or some sort of inner judgment, oh, I'm so bad at these greetings, instead of feeling like that, the intention here is to shift towards, I'm accepting I didn't say hi to every single one of these palm fronds. It could be palm fronds for you, fern fronds, or leaves on a tree, or shells on a beach, or rocks along a river. So that's the practice here that I call gratitude greetings while ambling along. You can come up with a different name that works for you. And again, the intention here is to connect with something, to train the mind that we can connect to other living and non-living things in very profound and deep ways. And it can temporarily fill the void you may have in that core need to connect. It may permanently fill a void in a core need to connect. And again, I would contend, and I'll conclude with this contention one more time, that our connections to wildlife and wild places can profoundly fill the core human need to connect in ways that does what? Actually enables us, empowers us, awakens us to connect with humans, perhaps in ways we hadn't considered before, because we're opening up our perspective, we're opening up our sense of possibility. All right. Well, this is Ellen Donoghue. Thank you so much from Your Ardent Nature. And once again, I ask of you, to what do you offer your ardent nature? With these basic tenets, we set our wholesome, heartfelt aspirations as best we can, moment to moment, day by day, week by month. You decide. We cultivate those inner strengths to the extent that we can, and we do it in the everyday flow of life. Rather than, I got to do my homework, I better read that handout Ellen gave me, we learn ways to do them as easily as we drink a glass of water, as we eat a healthy piece of fruit. We do them in the everyday flow of life. And then we reduce those habitual tendencies, those thought processes, our reactive tendencies. Maybe it's our rumination about the past, or our fixation on some future situation that is truly out of our control. We reduce those tendencies when we learn, when we inquire within that they may no longer be serving us particularly well. And then to the extent we are able and willing, whether it's for 2 hours a month, or full-time as your profession or volunteer services, we offer our unique gifts on behalf of some aspect of life on planet Earth. And if each of us does this in even a tiny way, we will benefit all beings, or so I contend. Thank you so much.